When we read a standard, authoritative textbook, the process feels completely frictionless. Information flows in an unbroken line from page to memory. Cognitive psychologists call this baseline state constructing a situations model. You are building a mental simulation of the characters, facts, and events exactly as the author describes them. That frictionless state disappears the moment we step outside of an artificial classroom environment. Professional research, law, and academia require navigating archives, journals, and reports that openly contradict one another. Faced with competing claims, a single situations model fractures. To resolve the paradox, the reader constructs a source model. Instead of just memorizing facts, they tag each fact with its origin, linking information to specific authors, dates, and biases. By wrapping the fractured situations model inside this new source model, the reader forms a complete documents model. They can now hold contradictory ideas in their mind simultaneously without losing coherence. Constructing this dual-layer mental model is not an innate cognitive default. It is a highly specialized skill that requires active effort and specific training. The dividing line between a functional reader and an expert is this transition. It marks the move from absorbing a single, unified story to managing a multi-layered architecture of competing claims. To understand how unnatural it is to track sources, we look at the default behavior of adolescent readers. In a year 2000 study, researchers asked middle school students to read a text containing two distinctly conflicting accounts of a fictitious protest. One side presented the government's official numbers, the other presented the protest organizers' claims. This table breaks down students' ability to track conflicting data. Notice the complete structure row. Only 16.7% of sixth graders maintained a complete argument. The rest exhibited sexual intrusions, dropping authors to write emotional statements like, "The police are too aggressive." Without a source model to organize the conflict, the students involuntarily blended the opposing claims into a single confused narrative. They accepted one side as the objective truth and discarded the rest. Eighth graders showed slight improvement, crossing the 50% threshold. But this structural reading flaw persists straight through to high-level academia. Cognitive maturity alone does not generate a functioning source model. The reader must be trained to see the text as an artifact. We see the mechanics of this training in a 1997 study examining how students reasoned about the 1903 U.S. military intervention in Panama. The researchers recruited two groups of graduate students of comparable academic level. One group specialized in psychology, making them novices in history, and the other specialized in history. Both groups were given a controversial historical problem and a study set of 7 documents. This set included primary treaties, first-hand participant accounts, and an excerpt from a standard college textbook. The psychology students treated the textbook as an authoritative truth. They rated it highly useful, evaluating the documents strictly by how well they described the events. In a psychology student's essay, nearly 75% of statements draw from second-hand accounts, focusing on characters like the Colombian Army and Panama. In the history expert's essay, the characters recede. Over 55% of statements rely on official documents, centering their analysis around the 1846 treaty. The history experts make almost no attempt to provide a single, clean narrative. They explicitly map the boundaries between conflicting accounts, evaluating the author's reliability to build arguments from raw evidence. Instead of simply accepting an action as historical fact, they evaluate the motives of figures like President Roosevelt, examining his statements as data points. This chart tracks how the groups reference documents in their writing. Look at the massive disparity in the citation of primary sources.
The experts relied extensively on raw, uninterpreted documents, ignoring the textbook the novices trusted. Reading expertise is an epistemological stance. Experts treat texts as biased lenses that require investigation, while novices treat them as transparent windows to the truth. But how exactly are these complex source models constructed in the brain during the real-time act of reading? A 2002 study by Stromso and Broughton observed law students reading lengthy legal texts, mapping the exact cognitive links they made as their eyes moved across the page. Novices use primary endogenous links, connecting the current sentence to a previous one to build a closed loop. but experts rely on exogenous links. Their brains constantly fire outward, connecting the text to unmentioned legal codes, past lectures, and prior experiences. Exogenous linking is the active retrieval of external context. The reader is pulling outside data into working memory to interrogate the text currently in front of them. This is exactly what the history specialists did with the Panama Canal documents. Their success relied entirely on this outward-facing strategy, bringing their own historical context to bear against the text. A document's model is only as strong as the exogenous links connecting a specific text to its broader intellectual environment. If this cognitive machinery is so highly specialized, the primary challenge for educators is clear. Can we force a novice to construct a source model? Researchers Wiley and Voss tested this by asking undergraduate students to study a series of historical documents about the 19th century Irish potato famine. They found that giving students the goal of writing a narrative triggered the lowest level of processing. The students defaulted to flat situations models, adopting a strategy where they simply copy and paste borrowed information into a timeline. But changing a single parameter changed the cognitive outcome. Giving the exact same students the goal of writing an argument forced them to engage the source model. They had to evaluate biases, resulting in essays full of transformed information and complex causal chains. This friction can also be generated by the text itself. When an author's motives and biases are highly visible in the writing, readers engage much more deeply with the source. Methods like questioning the author, where students are actively prompted to ask what an author is trying to achieve, have reliably improved comprehension, even in fourth graders. By high school, students develop a strong sense of epistemic authority. When researchers placed conflicting sentences in language texts versus science texts, students reacted differently. Because science textbooks project a higher level of absolute authority, students actually set higher internal standards for coherence. They were significantly more likely to detect and highlight contradictions in the science material. The perceived authority of the source and the specific argumentative task assigned to the reader are the primary levers instructional designers use to trigger expert-level processing. Simply exposing a reader to multiple documents is insufficient for deep learning. Without active source tracking, more information creates a confused narrative. The core characteristic of an elaborate documents model remains constant. The reader must keep precise, continuous track of exactly who said what. It requires prioritizing primary evidence over the ready-made interpretations packaged in textbooks. In a fully integrated documents model, the facts of a situation are permanently and securely tethered to the human biases that recorded them. On the World Wide Web, these strategies form the foundation of functional literacy. Navigating an uncurated information landscape requires the constant, active management of the source model. Deep comprehension is impossible without the deliberate friction of evaluating the source. Comprehension at this level requires an ongoing investigation into how we know what we know, turning the act of reading into a rigorous form of evidence-based inquiry.